Russian-occupied city of Berdyansk, the city itself destroyed by incessant shelling. Local authorities saying 2,500 residents have been killed so far. The Ukrainian capital Kyiv under fire this Monday. At least 3 different locations hit, including one residential building in the district of Obolan. Russian forces continuing their push to take over the seat of Ukrainian power. The U.S. and China hold high-level diplomatic talks in Rome. This follows U.S. reports that Moscow asked for Chinese military help in its bid to invade Ukraine. China and Russia dismiss those as American misinformation, while the U.S. pushes for China not to join the fray. Those are the headlines this hour. You're watching France 24, and I'm Charles Pellegrin. Starting with the latest from the ground in Ukraine, with multiple locations in the capital Kyiv being hit, including an Antonov aircraft factory targeted by Russian shelling, as well as a residential building, and Russian missiles being intercepted in the sky above it. In parallel to all this, the two warring sides holding a 4th round of negotiations, with Kyiv asking for a ceasefire and withdrawal of Russian troops before any other demand can be met. Those talks now paused until Tuesday, and some relief for residents of the besieged city of Mariupol, with a convoy of 160 cars able to leave the city, according to the city council, and head to the Russian-occupied city of Berdyansk. Nonetheless, Ukraine saying Russian shelling is preventing the delivery of aid to the city's residents, who've been deprived of basic necessities for over a week. Well, we're joined on set by Douglas Herbert, France 24's international affairs commentator. So let's start in Mariupol with these reports of a 160-car convoy able to leave the city safely. Can this be seen as some sort of goodwill gesture or some sort of PR?
Look, well, let's just start with the very fact that, you can only welcome the fact that at least some civilians are getting out of a city that has undergone some of the worst bombardment by Russian forces that we've seen on essentially European soil since the end of World War II. It's been absolutely horrific, and it's been relentless. And the broader picture, of course, is that the bombardment across Ukraine, the bombardment of Ukrainian cities by Russian forces continues unabated. Bombardment, heavy shelling, the humanitarian crisis. Mariupol obviously has garnered the biggest headlines because it is the town which has been besieged in such a way, encircled, that water, food, electricity, all the basic necessities for life left civilians basically without any of the resources they needed for daily sustenance. So yeah, 160 cars getting out is good news. It's to be welcomed. There's no reason to even try to put a negative spin on that. But the sad reality is, you asked me whether this is a PR move. It's a trickle in the ocean of really what's needed, and it's absolutely horrific that it even came to this, that this is a city, let's not forget, that continues, once these civilians are out, that will continue to be encircled and will remain under bombardment. This is a country where major cities are now either been, yes, stalled in their advance, say, towards Kiev, but it has not seemed to curb or thwart the determination, that was the word I believe that Macron used after speaking over the weekend with Vladimir Putin, Putin's determination to carry on with what he sees as a justified liberation operation of Ukraine until he has, in the Kremlin's words, full control of the country. So you're asking me, yes, good news that these civilians are moving out, that one humanitarian corridor among multiple attempts to open up these so-called humanitarian corridors, that one seems to be holding for now. There seems to be respect for the ceasefire. Right now, it's only been a few hours in the making. Sure, that's good news. But within the broader picture, the context in which you ever even needed these humanitarian corridors to get these civilians out of towns which never should have been besieged and encircled in the first place, targeting civilian infrastructure and residential buildings, in that context, it's a drop in the ocean, and it's horrific that it's come to this.
Well, moving on to the negotiation front now, Moscow and Kyiv started talks this Monday and then stopped this afternoon, saying they'll pick up again tomorrow, on Tuesday. What do we make of this?
Look, all of these issues are now, the reason that these talks are officially at least on hold, and the Ukrainian officials say it's now, there's some very difficult, thorny issues, I guess I'm putting it mildly, that these talks have run up against, and that's to be expected when you have two sides coming at the table with such vastly differing takes on what it means to hold negotiations. The Ukrainians, their main interest has been, their main demands, they've been consistent in these demands, they're the bare bottom demands. Get the ceasefire in place in the cities that I was just talking about across the country, whether we're talking about in the south, and Mykolaiv, Odessa is going to be targeted, is more and more a growing fear of being targeted. Mariupol, obviously, but Kharkiv in the north, Kiev obviously being encroached on. More and more cities now, reports of shelling and artillery over the weekend in the west of the country, which had been relatively unscathed until now. Get ceasefires in place, get the Russian forces to withdraw, retreat, get a withdrawal of those forces, and then begin talks. Those are clearly terms that Russia, no matter how much it is under duress, no matter how much its army is encountering resistance and a lot of setbacks that the Kremlin is not openly acknowledging, no matter how much, they are not going to relent. It doesn't take a rocket scientist to know the Kremlin's not going to concede on those basic issues there. So the talks will continue tomorrow. They will remain at these difficult points, but at the same time, as we are waiting until tomorrow, these cities continue to be besieged. Facts are being created on the ground, terms we've used with regards to other conflicts, obviously, in the world. And Putin, every day that goes by, every hour that goes by, he gets a little bit of extra time. He gains a little extra ground, or he gains at least a little extra leverage that he could begin to bring to these talks to exact as many concessions, even if it's short of full capitulation of Ukraine, which was in the beginning what he was looking for, absolute surrender, capitulation. He sees that's not happening, but he is determined to go on with this quote-unquote special military operation until he can extract as many concessions as he wants and gets, in the Kremlin's words, full control over Ukraine. That means every part, east, central, and west.
Douglas Herbert, our international affairs commentator there. Well, Russian forces stepping up their efforts to take over the Ukrainian capital, Kyiv, with increased shelling and bombing in various neighborhoods of the city. At least one person has been killed and 6 injured when debris from a Russian missile struck a residential street in Kyiv. Also, an Antonov aircraft factory targeted by Russian shelling this Monday. And earlier, one residential building in the Obolon district hit early this morning, leaving at least one dead. France 24's James André is there for us in front of that building, which was shelled. James André, thanks for joining us. Can you describe the scene around you now, a few hours after the building was hit?
Yes, absolutely. Well, this building was hit this morning around 5 a.m. And as you can see, it is a 9-story building. And here we have the entrance to one of the staircases of this building that you can see here that is completely destroyed. This is where this missile rocket hit this building. And well, for the moment, what we're being told by inhabitants here is that 2 people died in this attack, 9 people were wounded, are in hospital, and over 60 have had to be evacuated. Earlier on, we spoke to Anastasia, a young lady living in this building. She was telling us how it happened. She was sleeping when she heard the missile incoming. The whistling woke her up, and she says just 3 seconds later there was a huge detonation and all the windows were blown inside the building. Luckily for her, she was on the first floor, the other side of this building, and indeed she managed to get out unscathed like her parents. But indeed, of course, this is quite a shock. And as you can see right now, we have people who are trying to recuperate some of their belongings, some of their stuff in these flats that are now completely destroyed. And they are loading them into cars here in order to be able to take them to the next place where they will be living, which, of course, means a lot of uncertainty. Another important thing is that this is northern Kiev, and here in the north, what we do hear a lot is a lot of artillery departures, and we also hear the noise of missiles being fired back at the Russian forces. That's what we've been told here. So that is pretty much a relentless sound here that you hear in the distance, these explosions.
James André, you've been in Kyiv, traveling around the city for a few days now. What's the mood like in the city overall, especially with Russian forces knocking at the door, so to speak?
Well, the mood is one of expectation. The city is pretty much empty on the streets. There are some people, there are cars. As you know, half the population has left, but half the population is still here, which means that people are still living in the city and walking around. But there are few people on the streets. Shops are mostly closed. Some offices are open. We were being told that people were still going at work. Others were working remotely. School has restarted actually in Ukraine today, but it's done remotely. Schools are, of course, closed and have been since the beginning of this invasion. So indeed, it is a rather surprising mood of both people waiting to see what will happen, a lot of them not wanting to leave, but of course very worried about what will happen when Russian forces eventually encircle the city, if they do. Now, what you do see also, of course, is a city that is fortified. There are checkpoints everywhere. There's a lot of police and military personnel on the streets checking documents, many checkpoints, and indeed this mood of waiting. But there are still opportunities in Kiev for glimpses of normal life. In these northern neighborhoods, though, that is a lot less obvious.
James Andre reporting there from the district of Obolon in northern Kiev, just in front of that building that was hit by a Russian shell early in the morning this Monday.